Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to another Zoom chat. And this one is quite topical as it centers around the recent push by Dr. Patrice Motsepe to run for the CAF presidency. Now, of late, he's also kind of shared a 10-point plan that he has. And so he's also enjoying the support from a few quarters, one of the most notable being COSAFA. And to that point, we thought it important for us to speak to Ashford Mamelodi, who's an honorary general secretary of COSAFA, but he was also the former FIFA development officer for Southern and Eastern Africa, and so joins us now on this Zoom chat. Ndate Mamelodi, thank you so much for joining me and welcome.
Hamza, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. So let's talk about the point of you being an honorary general secretary of COSAFA, because they've come out with resounding support for Dr. Patrice Motsepe. Just what does it mean to have the backing of COSAFA by the president-elect?
Well, I really don't think COSAFA had a choice. Patrice Motsepe, in my view, ticks most of the boxes, Kamza. The only reservation I've ever had about him was perhaps the fact that, in terms of running football, perhaps he's got zero to very little experience. What you see in Sundowns is actually something that his investment in the club and making sure that he's got the right people to run it is what made it. But you put that against the man's business acumen, which is really second to none. And also the fact that he himself said it, I think at the launch, he's passionate about football. He loves football. Now, for me, that ticks even more boxes, Kabza.
Okay, now passion is very important, but you're right. Let's talk about just some of the concerns, since we're alluding to it, about him being able to run this entire operation. A lot of people worry, will he have the time? He also said in his speech that he's not looking at moving the headquarters from Egypt to South Africa. There's none of that, but it strikes me that it will take quite a fine balance for him to be able to, keep that going sufficiently whilst also having his other business interests? Or do you think he's going to have to, kind of give away a few of his current responsibilities to take this on full time?
Well, obviously, if he wins next month, comes it's goodbye to Sundowns in his present capacity. Look, if one understands the structure of football and how football is run, Dr. Motsepe should be able to do it. Patrice should be able to do it. But of course, there are certain worries I have, and these are not really related to Patrice. I've said he ticks most of the boxes. He probably stands a very good chance. But he's got three challenges, comes if I may come in on.
Sure.
I'm worried about historically. I know that he'll probably be, if he comes in, he'll be the 8th president, or basically the 7th, because one of them went twice for a guy from Sudan. But increasingly, especially during Hayatu's time, you get the feeling that French Africa wants this as their own, wants the leadership of CAF as their own. So I foresee a battle that defines English-speaking versus French-speaking. Okay, right. Look, inevitably, and this has happened even in some of Hayatu's elections, you had some of the English defecting over to the French, and vice versa. And if you look back at the president before, who unfortunately is not there anymore, or he's serving some sort of a ban, he was from COSAFA, but French speaking. And perhaps to French Africa, a compromise, a reasonable compromise. Unfortunately, my criticism of his election is that it was just about the language. unfortunately.
Sure.
I don't think credentials were anywhere near Patrice's credentials. So for me, that's the first challenge.
Mm.
Then there's an election culture in Africa. And I think being an advocate of African football, such as I am, we need to say these things, because sitting on them and pretending they don't exist are not a good thing, Kamza.
Mm.
There's what you call brown envelopes at CAF elections.
Right.
This I've seen firsthand.
Mm.
I don't know if it's still there because I haven't really been going to these AGMs, but I've got reason to believe it is still there.
Right.
In fact, there's strong talk that higher twos removal was very much about brown envelopes.
Hmm.
Now, you put Motsepe into this scenario. He comes from what I would believe, what I'd like to believe is a very clean environment. Is he also going to sit on the CAF seat on account of brown envelopes? Is he going to agree to this? At the same time, the voters, are they willing to vote for this man? Some of them who believe in these brown envelopes vote for this man called Patrice, great as he appears to be, and there's nothing, and no palms are being greased. This worries me, because sometimes in Africa, we've lost very good people, Kamza, owing to the fact that they just didn't come to the party with brown envelopes. And this is my fear. So that's the second challenge. And the last challenge, I enjoyed listening to Patrice as he launched yesterday. And a lot of things, his 10-point plan, I think it was, it resonates with me very much, Kamza. He's saying the right things. He brings music to the ear. But then you look at the governance of current MAs of Africa currently. Take just the presidents. How many of them will fall in sync with what Patrice wants to embark upon? Even some of those, perhaps without mentioning names, now moving very close to him, will they pass the test? That's what worries me. And the reason why I said Patrice can do it, Kamza, what was that he would make the best president. Busy as he is relying on working collectively, know, and that's the proper thing. Good governance is such that, the executive committee of CAF are a team, and all Patrice is a team leader. He's gone beyond that. He's opened his heart to all the presidents of Africa. Now, my worry is how many of them will honestly be singing from the same hymn book. How many of them will push with Patrice along what, for me, is what Africa needs?
Okay, so you raised three big points. Let's break them down one by one. Now, you speak about the Francophone versus English culture war that seems to happen. Besides a straight up cultural difference, what is the big gripe, or as the kids would call it, the beef between the Francophone segment of CAF and the English speaking segment of CAF? What is the nuts and bolts of the issues that the two camps have?
Like I said, there's no scientific study that's been done on it. It's just my personal assessment. I think it's a question of control. Can we trust the French to lead us? Some English were not too happy that Higher 2 was there, and for as long as he was. And I've seen it in previous elections. I remember, I think it was in the early 2002 or 2004, when Ismail Bamji tried to challenge Higher 2. What I could detect or sense from that was there was this big French push. He got one or two French votes, that I can assure you. But I tell you, it was not enough. And at the end of the day, it's the French making sure that, no, this is ours. If it's not hired, it's got to be another French person that we will put there. It's not so much on the English side, I must admit. But you see, here again is the problem with African football comes up. It shouldn't be about that. It should be about the best person. And for me, whether Patrice was from COSAFA or WAFU, it wouldn't matter to me if he's got the qualities that he's got. So this shouldn't even be on the table. But I'm worried that it does have a role to play. Hence, Ahmad coming in. I mean, with respect, I don't think he would have been in a choice of top 20 for me for CAF presidency, okay? Or top 50, if I want to be very honest. But there you are. He got it, you know what I mean? So the question really comes is, are we ready to let somebody as good as Patrice come in? Are we ready to support him? Because he'll need the support. And can we provide him an environment that he can work in?
Okay, on the point of Ahmad, I mean, since we're speaking of the man, what do you think his legacy will be? Because, from being cornered in airports and detained to all the stuff that's coming out and, almost has him now as a figment of CAF's imagination and the background due to the suspensions and all that's been brought against him. What do you think his legacy will stand as?
Offhand comes, I'm sorry, I'll struggle to find his legacy. He will go down in history as one of our not so best presidents. Somebody said the worst, and that may not be far. But remember, Kamza, and this again brings me. It will be the third point that we will discuss. Governance. He's not the first one. He lost his first vice president, Kwesi from Ghana. Similar sort of activities. The rot is quite deep, Kamza. It's not every country, it's not every president that's bad. Believe you me, there are some who can work with Patrice and who can deliver, but who are not necessarily running for elections.
Okay. I hear you. But to that point then, I mean, we speak about the rot. One has to then wonder, because if I look at the 10-point plan and it's, not about rooting out that corruption, the statutory reforms it speaks about, and, that's partnerships with other governing bodies. That being said, are you disappointed that it hasn't been an opportunity for Patrice to come out and say, I need to get that rot, that particular brown envelope mentality out of the structures? Or is it almost like a tacit agreement that this is what it is? And for me to kind of exist in this sphere of influence, I need to perhaps play along. Because if you're not calling it out outright and it exists, we kind of are missing where he stands on this.
Yeah, but Kamza, you need to understand, this is also a political game. And I've really respected, his choice of words. He's a very careful man. Everybody is like out there on the field, ready to work for football. You know what I mean? He makes it sound nice. I don't think if he starts calling out brown envelopes, and I've noticed even the media haven't asked him. I wish somebody would ask him that question and say, Patrice, football in Africa is known for these brown envelopes. What's your stand?
Sure.
My worry is I'm hoping that people, for a change, some of them will look at Patrice and say, look, we need this guy. Let's just forget whatever freebies we get at this time every 4 years. We need this guy. So it's a catch-22. Whether we've done enough campaign in order to make him cross the line without, I'm not sure. But I'm looking at Patrice and saying, look, this is the guy who will not go for brown envelopes. I'd like to believe he won't. If he's as genuine, as credible as he appears to be, I don't, and for me, that's not the right thing to do. You really have to elect a leader based on their abilities and their abilities to deliver. Okay. It can't really be about him passing over brown envelopes.
I hear you. One of your colleagues, Dr. Philip Chinyangwa, the COSAFA president, says it's not about gaining access to the coffers for Dr. Motsepe. Why do you think that's been a hallmark? And for him to have to come out and say something like that, has it sometimes been looked at as a piggy bank of those who run it, Kath?
In fact, if you had asked me, Kamza, what are some of strong entry points for Patrice, is the fact that he doesn't need football money. I can even see him donating some of his money to football, as he's already done. He himself said at the press conference, I think that he thinks he's, the one president who has probably paid much more for a club than any other, which is probably correct. So I wasn't surprised that Mr. Chiangwa said that. In fact, I understood exactly what it was. I mean, it's typically even African state presidents. You find that the most successful ones, in my view, are those who don't come very, very hungry, are those who've got their own and who are just saying, look, I need to give back to my community, which is what Patrice keeps saying. And it's not about how much I can make. But the rot I spoke about earlier comes out. Part of it is really this thing of how much am I going to get out of this thing while I'm still there, before I'm out. And that's what worries me. The environment that Patrice is going to operate under.
Okay. And then just to lend credence to that vote of confidence from COSAFA, I mean, is there a mea culpa that needs to come out and say, because we supported Ahmad, who was one of our own, and we've seen he's not done a great job, forgive us for that, miscalculation on our part, especially to the other federations who might be looking at this and saying, well, the last guy you backed, is going to go down as one of our worst. Why should we listen to what COSAFA has to say?
True. But that sort of evaluation never takes place in African football. Ahmad is history. And Patrice is the new kid on the block. My worry is, I think to sell him is probably the easiest thing to do, but it's whether, he's prepared for the baggage to cross the line. So I'm not too concerned about that.
Okay. And then in terms of running point for Patrice, a lot of people, even before yesterday's manifesto launch, were surprised to see how President Denny Jordan of SAFA was almost running point for Patrice with so much energy. What do you think is the importance of the relationship between SAFA and them supporting Patrice? Who stands to benefit from this and how?
Well, I think it's a good thing comes out that President Denny Jordan SAFA fully backs Patrice. That vote of confidence has to come from South Africa first. The rest of the continent must see SAFA as strongly backing Patrice. For them to say, "Wow, here's a candidate with the full endorsement of his association." So I think that is important. But like we said earlier, for me, the biggest challenge for Patrice is, who is he going to work with? Who is credible? Because he will need a team of credible people. Is there going to be any pushback? I'm happy that he's all very diplomatic now, but I can see that he's a shrewd businessman, and once he sits on that chair, he'll crack the whip. Now, and I think when you crack the whip, you are more likely to get support anyway. So I pray that he actually gets through and sits on that seat. How he's going to cross the River Jordan, I'm not too sure. We spoke about it earlier. But if he does, not through brown envelopes, but through mere pure credentials, I think it'll be one step done. But what then worries me is the team, the quality, the caliber of the team that is going to work with him. He needs people who think like him. People who are not interested in football money. People who will abhor brown envelopes. That's the impression I get about Patrice. And I don't know how many will still be there after the count.
How important is, the exploitation of African football, in the sense that, in the same sense as the music publisher would exploit the music to derive the best gain? In terms of our rights, it's such an issue still to be able to catch a Champions League game, a Confederations Cups game. You either are looking to the team that are playing, the host team, to show you the stream, But, a lot of people have been saying that as a first order of business, it needs to be that more eyes are drawn to African football. I mean, part of the manifesto, point one, investing in developing and growing football in each African country through sponsorships, private sector, and other partners. I'm guessing that it can't be ignored for much longer, just how much money we're losing from exploiting African football the way the Europeans do with the Champions League and the Europa and all the other properties that only derive their fullest value when they have the most amount of people watching them.
Absolutely. Once we've got the leadership right, comes up. Patrice made mention of it, the quality of competition. I mean, once we get the quality right, once we get it to European standards, comes that nothing will stop us from attracting the resources, the sponsorship partnerships that Patrice is dreaming about. He recognizes that. And he's very right that in order to grow football, money must flow into football. Money must flow into the players, right down to the players, so that we can take it to the next level. But hand in hand with that, in order to attract these investors, we need quality competitions. You know what I mean? He gave an example of some VAR. We won't go over it, but it was quite funny. And it's sad but that's not the only thing that you see. So the more we will be watching African football on our screens, the more African football will be exploited, commercially, such as in Europe. The stronger the continent will get in football. No question about that. There I agree with him 100%.
And I mean, to that point about growing the African game, he's trying to be more inclusive, have a lot of brains kind of lend ideas to what he's trying to do. But I mean, what are some of the harsh realities he's going to have to deal with? Obviously, we know that Africa is a bit of an export market. Our best talent tends to leave and go to Europe for bigger challenges. The politics sometimes come into play, but also just how wide and far this continent is and being able to get from area to area. What are some of the real challenges outside of the office at CAF that he's going to have in trying to unify and package African football for the world?
Well, comes this thing of if you like, an exodus of our players to other markets away from Africa. It's down to how much they earn relative to what a club in Europe will offer them. So if, as Patrice says, we try and get more money into our game, then the likelihood of that happening, or it will be seriously reduced so that we can retain top quality players. But you don't want to retain a top quality player in a substandard league. That's why, and I heard him very clearly in the press conference that he's thrown a gauntlet that every single president must come to the party. It's not about him being, waving a magic wand. It's about a collective. And that's a very strong point he makes. So I see that if the money flows in, comes out, that means we can then play better, improve competitions, our top leagues will be very competitive, and therefore our players will not feel second change playing in Africa rather than in Europe or in Asia or wherever they go. So it works both ways. And I think if we can get the resources in, if we can improve our competitions, get the resources in, like Egypt and some of the Northern African countries, we can try and, reduce, the exodus of our players, to other markets.
Okay. Let's maybe talk then and put into context just the challenge that he has ahead of him. When we look at the under candidates in Sengo, Yaya, and Anuma, these are names that are coming up as far as representatives from West Africa are concerned, backing from the likes of Wafu. And also there seems to be a sort of school of thought that, should one of them pull away from the other two, then they'll all get behind the one candidate to make sure that it's a big, worthy challenge to Patrice. How much of a challenge is he up against?
What is, like I said, remember my first point of French versus English. We are asking the French Africa to listen to us. We've got a very credible candidate one who will change the fortunes of the game. They will probably throw one of the three names as well. And this is another problem with Africa comes that we can't just seem to be agreed on some things which are fairly obvious.
Which is what? What are the obvious things in this scenario in your mind?
No, I'm saying we've got a very credible candidate here, okay? He probably, on any scale, will be better than his three competitors. But it will go beyond whether Motsepe is good or not. It'll be other factors. What is he putting on the table? We spoke earlier about brown envelopes and so forth. For some countries, for some presidents, these brown envelopes are very important, okay? And they determine the vote. Huh? So it comes, it's not about whether you're good or not, it's whether you're coming to the party or not. And this is, and I mean, I'm also a critic. One of the criticisms I have, even with my own zone, COSAFA, we've got too many candidates, one against the other for the FIFA seat. We've got almost 4 or 5 vying for one seat at the executive level. I think this for me worries me. There should be a barometer comes up by which we can measure and say, look, we've agreed. I mean, like we're supporting Patrice, wouldn't it have been nice to support our candidate for FIFA, one person, apart from Patrice, and then support our candidate for the CAF seat together? So here you've got COSAFA fully behind the president-elect for CAF, but we can't talk about the rest because many of our members are vying for the same seats. Are you with me? And for me, I think that is also another African problem. And it's not only happening in COSAFA, it's happening in the other African regions as well, where we are not able to say, look, Kamza is better than Simpiwe, let Kamza do it. You know what I mean? And all agree, you know what I mean? And I really think if football was our passion, our prime objective to develop football, these decisions should be fairly easy. So that's another African problem.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, people think a lot with their stomachs. It happens a lot. And you're hoping for a huge cultural change from Patrice. So with all that said, with all that he said at the manifesto, how many minds do you think have been changed? And, do you think he's garnered a bit more support? Or is there still a lot of work to do in the coming weeks up until the 12th of March for him to convince more blocks, more voters? Or does he have it in the bag? I mean, it's, you don't want to call it too soon, but how do you see the next kind of couple of weeks lending to his cause or taking away from his cause, if it were?
Yeah, remember the 3 challenges we spoke about earlier, Kamza?
Yeah.
They come into play here, especially the first 2, your French connection and your brown envelopes. But I think from yesterday's press conference, Patrice has put forward a very compelling case. If it was just about whether we can trust the man to do the job or not, I would say he's got one foot in there already. But I'm worried about the challenges that he's got to overcome. And I'm hoping that even though he's all very well-spoken, very diplomatic in his communication, he knows the terrain he's getting himself into. He knows that it's going to be tough. He knows that, and I think the emphasis on professionalism, on governance, suggests to me that somebody has been honest with him and said to him, you know what, my man, you're getting into a minefield. So hence the importance of stressing these things. Now, like in politics comes up, there can also be a fight back when people suddenly feel uncomfortable, when suddenly business as usual is no more. You know what I mean? When suddenly we've got a captain who wants us to do it correctly. You know what I mean? And we are used to doing it correctly in another way. So now for me, even if Patrice crosses the river and he's on the other side, there is so much work to be done. You are right, before the election date, he's also going to sell himself. I don't know what strategies he's going to use. I don't know what his campaign strategy is, but he's really got to convince both English and French across the continent that, look, if it's football that we want to take forward, I'm your man. You know what I mean? And if it can rest there and there are no other agenda items, I don't see any problems for Patrice. But I'm just worried about this continent of ours, man. If it was another continent, I think, it would be a foregone conclusion, comes.
Right, right. Let's talk about that campaign because, some may argue that he looked for a while to be unwilling. I mentioned Danny Jordan kind of carrying the baton for him earlier. He's gone from an unwilling to a willing participant. And do you think, as far as campaign strategy is concerned, he did that soon enough? Did he wait maybe too long to come out and vocalize his position? Has that hurt him? Or have you seen him unfurl his strategy at a consistent basis, or consistent enough for him to gain traction?
I think yes, he could have started earlier. But I mean, if you get a Messiah the night before elections comes up, go for that Messiah, man. If you can understand him and believe in what he says, go for him. You know what I mean? I think by the time we get to elections, all the presidents, because they're the ones who vote, mind you, from member associations, will have understood what Patrice stands for. Okay, and provided there are no other supplementary agenda items, and they can look at the man, look at his background, look at what he's achieved in business. And I think the mere fact that Patrice wants to get himself into this minefield shows the sort of man he's got. He's brave. And I don't think he's as naive as he sounds to certain people, that he's getting into a very even football field, with people willing to run the course. I think he knows, but he's being very, very measured in what he says. He's not calling out. And I think you don't call out before elections, like I said earlier.
There we go. And then lastly, in terms of the optics and observations from all of those watching, those three challenges you mentioned, I'm sure your colleagues in other federations are well aware of some, if not all of them. This is essentially about to become a vote on CAF's ethics. How important, if it's being measured by that, is that going to be whoever becomes president? Because obviously, moving forward, there's a lot of eyes on lots of governing bodies around the world to be looking to do the right thing. Does the support of Infantino suggest that this is a federation looking to do the right thing with Patrice at the helm? Just what are the optics looking at CAF from the outside at the moment, do you think, for other governing bodies?
Sorry, I don't know if I understood your question right.
Just in terms of the optics, what do you think the rest of the world sees when they look at CAF? What do the other federations see? I mean, we come up FIFA supporting Patrice, but what does everyone see when they look at CAF? Because it looks like it's going to be a vote on CAF's ethics on the 12th of March.
Yes, unfortunately, that's the biggest worry I've got, and whether enough work will be done for us to suddenly come together as a continent for the good of football is everybody's question that comes up. But my view very strongly is that if, and I keep on saying if, I'm sorry to say if too many times, if we can focus on what's good for football, you're talking about ethics. And for me, I would love Patrice to come in, and for many other reasons, because I believe that African football needs a rebirth, okay? It needs governance properly put in its place, okay? We need to be, ethically very strong to compare with your likes of Europe. And one can understand why Europe leads in football, because they don't discuss what we're discussing, Kamza. They'll be saying, wow, we've got Motsepe, we've landed a diamond, let's go. You know what I mean? But here we are saying, what are the bottlenecks? And there are bottlenecks. Let nobody assume that it's done. It won't be done until the 12th, okay? And I hope it will be done. But the challenge is that Motsepe has got beyond the elections is huge. And if he can achieve it, he will qualify for sainthood without any question, because we need to. And once Africa is sorted out, remember, and I loved it when he said he wants Africa to compete with the very best out there. And if Africa did, then we are not very far from your World Cup finals, possibly winning the World Cup for the first time. But it's all these myriad of problems that we've had comes out that have slowed progress, that have effectively retarded progress of African football. So that's why, what Motsepe speaks to, his 10-point plan or 11-point plan, whatever it is music to my ears. But I'm saying a prayer every day for him because I want him to succeed. But another prayer says, please give him, a good team to work with. Okay, and if the amongst the presidents of the rest of the continent, if there are those who just can't come to the party, they must step aside. Okay, there must be no pushback, because that normally happens when people get what comes, which is not expected by them. So it will be quite interesting.
Mr. Mamelodi, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure speaking to you and trying to get to the bottom of these governance issues, especially as far as the African continent is concerned. Let's hope that come the 12th of March, we can set a new agenda with some new people. It's kind of scary to think that if it's not Patrice we see post that some of the concerns you have raised, unfortunately, will continue. Are you hearing a ventilation from the other side, from the other candidates, that perhaps they also believe in this structural regeneration for CAF? Or do you think we're going to see more of the same?
I'm worried. If it's not Patrice, it will definitely take us longer to get out of the quagmire. We need Patrice, we need his energy currently, and we need a good team around him to transform African football. I really don't think, if he doesn't make it, we're going to be that far behind, you know what I mean? And it's going to take longer, unfortunately. And I wish, leaders of African football can see this and say, look, guys, this is perhaps a golden opportunity for our football in Africa. And let's give this man people to work with, people who think like him, for goodness sake.
There we go. Let's hope that's exactly what we get. We'll wish him all the best for the 12th of March, Dr. Patrice Motsepe. For him to carry the baton and fly the flag for African football. As for you, sir, Mr. Ashford Mamelodi, thank you so much once again for joining us here on Front Runner.
It was a pleasure, Kamza. Always a pleasure.